Hello and welcome to Fulham Fan News. Today's episode is all about numbers and money and budgets and this, that, and the other. And to do that, we're joined by the wonderful Cottage Analytica, Mr. Chris Frank. Chris, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show. I've watched all the episodes so far, and it's got me very excited about all the potential transfers we could get at Fulham. Although obviously none of them have actually come in yet.
Yeah. And of course, joined by Joe Gunning once again. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. On a personal level, I just wanted to say that I love the Cottage Analytica page, one of my favorite Twitter pages. I'm always checking it out during the season, the insights of it.
Well, thank you very much,
Brilliant.
Joe. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody loves Cottage Analytica. We all look out for the stats on a weekly basis. So tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the budgets. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of why Fulham have been so up against it recently in the last few years, and what could be available to us this season. So first of all, Chris, would you like to explain what your page does for those people that haven't seen it, and then get into the nitty gritty side of it?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So I started Cottage Analytica as kind of a blog when the pandemic first started. So it was just a website and a blog in those days, and I sort of did some quite hardcore data analysis on football stats and XG and things like that. And then I found no one was really going to the blog and reading it. So I started a Twitter account to drive traffic to the blog. And then I found that actually what people were interested in was the Twitter account and the sort of much more short and pithy summaries of the analysis. So most of what I do now is on the Twitter side of things. But within that Twitter account, I basically focus on football stats. So I'm interested in things like XG and what that tells us about players and teams and how players perform within teams. And then the other thing I like to do, because I'm also an accountant by trade, is I like to get into the finances of football and Fulham in particular. And I think that's where the real link comes in with what you guys do on your channel, because with the finances, it really tells us a lot about how Fulham are constrained by something called the financial fair play rules, and we can talk a bit about what that means, um, and how the finances tell us what they tell us about Fulham's capability of acting in the transfer market and bringing in new players.
Yeah, it's a lot of people don't realize how transfer works, and it's obviously there's a lot of things that work in the transfer. We've got amortization, things like that that obviously you've explained in the past on your page. Um, so yeah, well, what I'd like to talk about is just to talk about the last 4 years. Obviously, financial fair play runs over 4 years. We're talking amortization, which is over the period of a contract. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go back to 2018, a year that for a lot of Fulham fans don't really like to remember. Um, a summer window that we all thought was fantastic that didn't turn out to quite be as good as we thought. So yeah, Joe, have you got anything to add on what you'd like to ask or?
No, got it all covered. Yeah, bringing back up to that window. Yeah, so for me, I was a little bit confused. I saw a few things on Twitter saying that like our FFP had been reset, stuff like that. Apparently, we can spend a lot more this summer than we've been able to for the last 4 years, ever since the infamous 2018 big 100 mil plus spending. So yeah, I was just wanting to know about all of that, why it's been reset or if it's been reset at all, and why we have the capabilities to spend so much money.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that. So you're exactly right. Like the key problems for Fulham over the last 4 years started with that 2018 summer when we just got promoted at Wembley. It was Djukanovic taking Fulham into the Premier League, and Fulham spent very big on the squads that year. And in particular, they spent this, I think it was about £110 million on 7 players. And those players, I think it was Mitro, obviously turned out to be a pretty good signing. But we also had Anguissa, Seri, Maxime Lemarchand, Mawson, Brian, and the seventh member of that illustrious group is the goalkeeper Fabry, if you remember him. And we spent a huge amount on those players, £110 million, and also locked ourselves into some quite big contracts in terms of the wages we were paying them. So what those purchase of those 7 players did was they basically committed us through the amortization of the transfer fees. And just to explain, I know you've referenced that already, but for people who are not familiar, in football accounting, when a football club pays a transfer fee for a player, rather than recognize it in the accounts all at once, they spread that transfer fee spending over the life of a player's contract. So if you were to sign a player for £10 million and sign them to a 4-year contract, what you would recognize in the accounts is £2.5 million of transfer spending, i.e., 1/4 of the £10 million every year for the 4 years. So that's basically what happened with the £110 million Fulham spent that summer. The contracts that were signed were broadly 4 or 5 years. So roughly, it committed Fulham to around £27 million of transfer fee amortisation every year for the next 4 years, plus £17 million of wages every year for the next 4 years, because all those players were on very fat contracts. And that means a total spend of about £45 million on these 7 players, most of whom ended up getting injured or being duds or otherwise just failing to perform. And to put that in context, when Fulham got relegated, in the Championship, Fulham is generating, before you look at TV and stuff, about £15 million a year in revenue. And yet they've got these 7 guys they have to spend £45 million a year on. And it's kind of wrestling with that problem that has put Fulham under such big financial constraints ever since that 2018 summer. And thinking about how are we going to deal with Anguissa and Seri? Are we going to loan them out? Are we going to try and use them in the team? Can we sell them? And all those sorts of issues has really been the main financial focus ever since that big spend. And the reason things are better now is that most of those players, except for Mitrovic, have now left the club. So they are now, the wages are off the wage bill. The transfer fees have stopped amortizing. So that £45 million spending commitment is now mostly gone. And Fulham actually have a pretty lean and low-cost squad now, so much so that I think last season, the season just gone, they probably made a pretty tidy profit in the Premier League, which is pretty unheard of for Fulham. And that has really relaxed the financial fair play restrictions. So whereas before, every transfer window, we were right up against the limits on FFP, and every deal had to be structured in a clever way, with sort of add-ons later on to kind of get under these really difficult FFP hurdles. Now that's all much more relaxed, and I think the club is able to sort of spend a fairly significant amount more money than they've been able to in the last 4 years.
Okay, so do you think that might be why we've not bought anyone yet? Do you think they're waiting to get their right targets? Obviously, I'm aware that Marco Silva is heavily involved now with the transfers. We've seen this week links to players like Morato and Yunus Musa, who both articles I've read have said that he's a Marco Silva target, not specifically a Fulham target, but more that the manager wants him rather than the club wants him. So do you think that that's why maybe we haven't made any real moves yet in the market?
Well, I still think that it seems that Fulham's philosophy is to wait to the end of the transfer window, and I think they believe they can get bargains at the end of the transfer window. And there's some evidence, I think, in the past that is true. So I suspect that's still the philosophy of the club, and it always seems to me that they have lots and lots of negotiations going on with lots and lots of potential players for the same role, and they're kind of waiting to see which one becomes incredibly cheap right at the end of the window, and they'll get that one. So I suspect that's still the case. I still think Fulham are very constrained financially compared to other Premier League clubs. It's just not quite as drastic as it has been in the past. So Fulham, from a financial point of view, are still one of the smallest clubs in the Premier League, and that means that the size of their budget for their first team squad is also going to be one of the smallest in the Premier League as well. And they're always going to be acting under really tight restrictions. It's just it was even worse in the past 3 years. So I still expect them to go and try and pick up some bargains at the end of the transfer window.
Yeah, Tony Khan's bargain bin.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Jeff.
do you mind if I jump in? So I was just wondering, so why I read somewhere that we've got that Shahid Khan is the 8th richest owner in world football. So why are we so financially constricted? Is that to do with where we finish in the league, or like what is that to do with?
Yeah, so that's all to do with the financial fair play rules. And it's a really good point, yeah, because we do have really wealthy owners. So the question is, why can't they just go and buy, buy the best squad in the league, like Man City do? And the reason is the financial fair play rules, which basically limit the amount you can spend based on the amount of money that the club generates. And the fact is that the amount of money Fulham generates is a function of what people pay on the turnstiles, the merchandise they buy, and the sponsorship the club gets. And the fact that the owner is incredibly rich doesn't bring in more revenue, and it's the low revenue that constricts the spending. I'm sure the ownership would like to spend more money, but the rules forbid it. In fact, as I say, with one of the lowest revenues in the league, we also therefore have one of the lowest budgets for our squad.
I see.
Okay. So yeah, you obviously we've been linked with Yunus Musa, and obviously we discussed yesterday roughly, about Fulham America and how we can use that to expand that revenue a little bit. Would you like to expand on that and tell the people what you think about that?
Yes, please. Well, this is one of my favorite pet topics at the moment. So the basic problem statement is, as I've kind of set out already, that Fulham have one of the lowest revenues in the league and therefore one of the lowest budgets for the squad. And that means that unless something changes, Fulham's always going to be financially struggling around the bottom of the league. It's going to be hard for us to buy the best players. We're always going to be in this kind of between the Premier League and Championship space. We have to spend money more efficiently than everybody else in order to succeed. And that's probably not sustainable long term. So how can Fulham improve their revenue is the key question for the club. And I suppose one thing we've kind of seen from the club recently is trying to get more money out of the domestic fan base in the UK. So obviously built the stadium up a bit. There's sort of more facilities coming in the Riverside stand. We've seen the ticket prices go up a lot, which is controversial. I don't really want to get into that too much. But basically what we're seeing is the club try to squeeze every penny out of this kind of domestic fan base that we have. But it is a small fan base. We're not a gigantic club, and there's probably limits to how big that fan base in the UK can get. But what we do have is this historic link to United States. Obviously, we've got American ownership, and we've had a lot of American players in the past, including 2 right now. So my view is that with football's popularity in the United States growing really, really fast, it's becoming one of the more watched sports over there, and the Premier League is the most, I guess, watched football product, is that Fulham should be trying to position themselves as America's team in the Premier League, and we should be the team that the casual or even the hardcore American football fan follows in the Premier League. Because we've got all these connections to the United States, we've got these American players historically and right now, so that we just really need to leverage that. So when the Yunus Musa rumor started, and there's another one this morning, I think. Sorry, I forget the name. The Barcelona fullback, I think, is also American.
Serginho Dest.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah. When these rumors start circulating, I think if Fulham can sign these sort of US men's national team players, then that's really going to increase the profile of the club in the United States. And that's the only way that I can see that Fulham's going to move off the kind of bottom of the finance table where they are now and move up, towards the top of the teams who are outside of the Big Six and become sustainable in the Premier League. So I get really enthusiastic whenever there's a link to an American player, because I think this is the time with football popularity growing in America. We've had Ted Lasso, we've had Welcome to Wrexham, and all those things. Now's the time to capture that market, and I think having these players helps us do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. Joe, do you have anything to add on that? Would you like to see more American players?
I'd love to. I mean, I think the more we get, the more we'll continue to get as well. I mean, they go off to international camp together. Obviously, players talk. Hopefully, we can get some player agents doing some scouting for the club. But no, I think it's great as well. I mean, if we get that audience. It's such a huge possibility that we could have for the club. So yeah, I'm in total agreement.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of an untapped resource, to be honest. Obviously, we've had, like Chris says, many American players in the past, and the vast majority of them have been very good for Fulham. I think Dempsey, Brian McBride, even like Carlos
Yeah.
Bocanegra had good period of time at Fulham. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that Fulham could look at and probably are looking at, because the Khans, they're not silly people. They know what they're doing, and we've seen our game grow over there, the game grow over there massively. And yeah, I agree with Chris. I think that this could be a way that Fulham push themselves onto that next level, because we don't want to be labelled as a yo-yo team. We don't want to be bottom half of the Premier League or top of the Championship. Although it's exciting and you're always battling relegation or you're always battling to get up to the Premier League, you're always going to be selling your best players as well. And one thing I like about the Khans is the fact that every time someone does come for our big players, the likes of Mitrovic, Kearney a few years back, the Khans do dig in. They don't just let them go. So obviously we've seen links with Palhinha this summer, and
Mhm.
I know there's a long way to go, but instantly slapping 90 million on his head, which is what the reports are saying, that says to me that no, we're going to stay here. We want to stay in the Premier League. We want to build. We're not going to sell our best players. So for me, that's a really big statement. And obviously Anthony Robinson signing a new 5-year deal, which really surprised me, to be honest. I thought maybe one or two, an extension, but 5 years says that he's there for the long haul, and that's a commitment. So just reading between the lines on that one, what do you guys think about that one? Because to me, that says that they're backing Marco Silva. Marco Silva is definitely ready to stay. He's ready to sign on the dotted line. Joe, what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's a real statement of intent. I mean, 5 years, he's properly in it for the long haul. If worst comes to worst, we do end up not signing what we need, who we needed to sign, and we go down. I think Anthony Robinson will be one of the players that sticks with us. He's come down with us before. I know there are quite a few people who aren't a huge fan of Anthony Robinson, and sure, his crossing could be a little bit improved, especially since we've got the big presence of Mitrovic in the box. It feels like it can't be that hard to just get it anywhere near his head. Um, but I think he's fantastic. I mean, the way he goes forward with the ball is he's so quick, so good on the ball, good at getting back. Yeah, real good thing to do. And I think that this is what Marco wants. He wants the key players tied down to contracts where he knows that they're staying. And then I think he'll get the Cons, he'll get them to get a little boogie on, get the players that he wants in. And that's, I think, as a football club, that's what you want. You want the players that your manager wants, not the ones that all of Tony Khan and Alistair McIntosh's huge stat systems suggest. You want who Marco Silva wants, who he knows he can work with. Yeah, it's great. It's a good sign.
And obviously, Chris, back to the stats on that one, a 5-year deal, if he has been given a significant pay rise, again, it'll be amortized down across those 5 years, and we won't see as much of a big expenditure this season on it or every season on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the amortization affects the transfer fee that we paid for him, which was only, I think it's about £1.5 million we paid to
Yeah.
Wigan. So, I mean, that's one of the great things about Anthony Robinson is actually, in terms of transfer fees now, that's almost entirely amortized away. There's almost nothing in terms of his cost to Fulham, other than his wages, which will no doubt have gone up a fair chunk. But yeah, I think yeah, it's a great deal for Fulham. Yeah, it seems to imply that Silva must be staying if we manage to tie down a player like Robinson to a long contract. And yeah, if we could just get his crosses, which are numerous, to actually find a target, then we'd have it'd be a hell of a player. I mean, he put so many crosses into the box. I don't think he had a single assist from them last year, and he's aiming at Mitrovic. So yeah, that seems almost impossible. I feel like if I could put 20 crosses into the box, surely Mitrovic would get on the end of one of them. But yeah,
You'd
that's
hope
the
so.
one step to that's the next step to take, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think with Anthony Robinson, if he did have that ability to find someone in the box with his crosses, that he wouldn't play for Fulham. I think he's that good going forward. He's such an outlet. That Ream to Robinson outlet for Fulham is just That was so important to us last season, and I think Cottage Tactico on Twitter pointed it out. He put a stats up on it, and Robinson was the player with the most dribbles in the Premier League last season. So that says a lot, right? The most direct forward dribbles. He gets the ball and he carries us up the pitch. He's so important to what Marco Silva wants Fulham to do. And obviously, a player like Serginho Dest coming in, if he was to come in, would do the same on the other side. Kenny Tete is not going to lose his place. Let's face it. He's one of the best right backs in the league. But a player like Dest, who is better attacking against teams who are, the Burnleys, the Sheffield Uniteds, the Lutons, the teams that have come up, I think that a player like that would give Fulham that same outlet on the other side. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think that would be really exciting to have someone who is an attacking fullback to come in for those games as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Actually, the other play I think you mentioned in your last episode, who's also a bit like that, is it Josh Brené, um,
Yeah.
who I think he plays on the right hand side, but statistically looks unbelievably attacking. Like if you look at his kind of FBref profile, in terms of XGs, shots, crosses, all these things, he looks like more of a winger than a fullback. It's really quite stunning. He's basically the same profile, I think, as Anthony Robinson, but on the other side, and perhaps with more output. The only thing that gives me pause about him is why he's so cheap at the moment. Like we seem to be talking about very low transfer fees, and his wages are very low. So there must be something. There must be a problem there, because otherwise everyone would be trying to buy him. But I thought that was quite an interesting one that you guys talked about in your last episode.
Yeah, well, with Joshua Brenner is I think it's more the fact that his contract's running out and they don't want to lose him for free. So they've put that price tag on him. I mean, back in January, I think we were linked with him back in January as well, and roughly the same sort of price. But they said no, we want to hold on to him till the end of the season, sell him in the summer. But yeah, he's I think 10 goals and assists last season. It's just for a right back, and like you say, his XG and his output from right back is incredible. And also he's the captain of FC20, so I'm guessing that's probably another reason why they didn't want to lose him last season. Great leadership skills, obviously. Yeah, so he'd be a really good addition, and financially for Fulham, it would make sense for depth as well.
Yeah.
So obviously Tim Ream as well, another American player. He's obviously a big part of Fulham's defence at the moment. But we've seen links to Fulham signing a new centre back in the future. Do you think that could hinder the Fulham America thing, or do you think that Tim Ream's here to stay for the long haul?
Well, I don't know. I think every season for the last 3 or 4, I've thought this must be Tim Ream's last year, and every season he's kind of found another level and proved everyone wrong. But there must come an end to he can't literally go on forever. So there will be a season, and it will be soon, where his powers start to wane, and we will need someone to take his place. And I think in terms of Fulham America, as long as we've got a couple of players in the squad, then that sort of leverage that American angle, then that's fine. But yeah, I think Fulham have to be thinking about replacements for Tim Ream. He can't go on forever, and I suspect perhaps this season is the one where maybe we start to see a transition, maybe start sharing some minutes with a potential replacement. It's got to happen sooner or later, and probably sooner if we're honest.
Yeah, Joe, have you got any questions to ask Chris?
No more questions. I was just going to say on the Tim Ream thing, I think it's also off the pitch. He's got such a presence. I mean, we know that Tom Kearney is the official captain, but Tim Ream does so much for the club. You always see when they're presenting awards to players, it's always Tom and Tim Ream. I can't see him leaving anytime soon. Definitely not. But I think on the pitch, yeah, same sort of thing. Like, how can he keep going? Surely next year will be the one where we see the slow fall off and the slow decline. But who knows? Maybe not. I mean, like Pep Guardiola said, if he was 10 years younger, even he would sign him. So who knows what we're in store for? But I do think, obviously, we had Diop and Tosin. Who knows whether Tosin will still be here at the beginning of next season? Duffy we had as well. I think Duffy was the transfer last season that just came out of nowhere. I remember I woke up one day we hadn't been linked to any centre back, or we'd been linked to centre backs, but there was no concrete talks, and suddenly we just signed him. So I'm kind of hoping for one of those again. I'll just wake up and see that Fulham have officially announced someone, but I'm doubtful.
And Chris, I just wanted to talk about the Willian thing as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of people are saying at 34 he wants a 2-year deal. Apparently, according to the Athletic, it's £100,000 a week, so pretty much doubling his wages. Financially, though, that's a good deal for Fulham. I know it sounds silly, but you're not going to find a player of that quality, even if we get another year out of him at that output that he had last season. You're looking at a £50 million player. Other than that, aren't you? I mean, we're looking at spending roughly 10 million on him across maybe 2 years, but you're not going to find a
Yeah.
player of his quality for that.
I think that's the key point here. It's kind of the opportunity cost of losing him. What's it going to cost you to buy a player that good to replace him? And as you say, it's going to be much more than £10 million over 2 years. We were already paying him about £2 million. We paid him about £2 million last season, as I understand it. So we're adding another 3 to keep him for the coming season, and maybe another 5, for the season after. But I think it's it's great value. To put it in context, that's roughly how much I think we paid for Kazawa last year to sit on the bench. So obviously that was a bad deal financially, but we're going to get a lot more out of Willian than we got out of Kazawa, I would hope. So in that context, I think it fits within the overall club budget and structure. I think it's okay, and he was one of our best season players last season. So I'm all for keeping him for another year. It seems like a win-win. It's good for him. I think it's good for us as well.
And of course, it's another thing that shows that Marco is sticking around, hopefully, because he's pushing for Willian to stay at the club.
Yeah.
So, gents, thank you very much. Chris, thank you for joining us. It's been really insightful, wonderful to have you on. I hope you come back at some point in the season. Joe, wonderful to have you again, mate. Just want to touch on, Joe did an article with Joseph Parker for the South West Londoner. So if you haven't checked that out, just go on South West London's website. It's on there. Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a lovely day, and come on, Fulham.
And you. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.